Hello friends, welcome to yet another session on essay perspectives. Topic for today is imagination creates reality. Friends, as always, I have a personal request. Third edition of my book Ethics, Integrity and Aptitude has been pirated. Unfortunately, pirated book is of very low print and paper quality. I urge all of you to buy original. Original books can be bought from the seller Arvind India on Flipkart and affordable on Amazon. Friends, as for every other essay, it is important for conceptualizing this essay also as being made of various components and subcomponents. This essay we would introduce first, then we would elaborate on the essence of the topic. Then we would explore as to how imagination helps reality. Then we would talk about limitations of imagination. Then we will introduce an analytical angle to it. Seeking to explore the answer for the question, is every reality an offshoot of imagination? In other words, is there any reality which can happen even without being preceded by imagination? So then before we conclude, we would discuss on how to condition the imagination. Then we would conclude. Friends, I feel the best way to start this essay is by referring to Karl Marx, because it was Karl Marx. Communism was actually a figment of imagination by Karl Marx. Karl Marx imagined a classless society. At the time of Karl Marx, actually the society was divided into classes, working classes and capitalist classes. So seeing the injustice that was being meted out to the working class by the capitalist class, seeing the concentration of wealth with only handful of people by capitalists, leaving the huge number of working class masses to lurch for themselves, actually made Karl Marx to imagine a society with no classes, basically a classless society where the workers themselves are owners actually. So that figment of imagination later actually secured a lot of acceptance across the world. So it was because of that imagination in future. So there were some people who accepted that whatever was imagined by Karl Marx would be productive and fruitful for their society. And finally we could see communist governments being set up in many countries in the world, say Russia, say China, even in Cuba for that matter. So basically the reality of communism was mostly because of the power of imagination being expressed by Karl Marx. So Karl Marx, today's reality of communism is nothing but the result of imagination of Karl Marx yesterday. So this is what I am trying to tell you. So perhaps by taking like this, you can start this essay. And there are a number of other examples also, friends, which you can use to start this essay. After we have introduced the topic, now it is important to elaborate on the essence of the topic. So there are two keywords, imagination and reality. So first keyword is imagination. So what is the meaning of imagination? Imagination is basically a psychological conception. Okay. So what is reality? Reality is physical actualization. So imagination is psychological conception. Reality is physical actualization. So what is imagination? See, psychologically, if you conceive something, that is what we call imagination. The whatever physically, tangibly gets actualized on the ground is what we call reality. So basically imagination is intangible, reality is tangible. Imagination is psychological, reality is physical. So the whole then we need to explore the relationship between imagination and reality. See, it is popularly said that today's reality is yesterday's imagination, or in other words, imagination creates reality. Then how does imagination creates reality? See, before we make anything physical, before we create anything, it has to be first conceptualized in the mind, isn't it actually? So thus the genesis of physical world is a psychological world. The genesis of physical world can be traced back to psychological world of someone actually. So without thinking about something, without deriving the pleasure of creating something in the psychological world, nothing gets created. So thus it appears on the face actually, or prima facie it appears that everything is first conceptualized in mind, everything is first imagined, and then it is put to actual reality. So here we can even invoke the quote of Albert Einstein, who says imagination is more important than knowledge. So that means the knowledge has boundaries, but imagination does not have any boundaries. You are free to imagine anything. You are free to imagine things which don't exist. You can imagine things which you don't think can ever exist. Such things also can never be imagined. Correct. So thus directly or indirectly, every reality can be traced back to someone or the other's imagination. So thus you can, maybe here you can again give one or two examples. You can again talk about how science fiction has inspired science. So most of us are aware that actually the robotics is greatly influenced by the fictional writings of Isaac Asimov. So thus everything has is first imagined as a fiction, and then somebody gets inspired and they try to put it into reality. So you can give like that many examples. Once we have argued that today's reality is yesterday's imagination, or tomorrow's reality is today's imagination, so it is important for us to elaborate on the same. So here the first thing is, so the next component should be how imagination helps reality. Correct. See, the first basic question that needs to be answered before creating any reality is what to create. Okay, that is the fundamental basic question, isn't it? The answer to this fundamental basic question is given by imagination only. The persistent need of people to travel long distances in shorter span of time motivated people to imagine various ways of achieving that. Correct. One such way is traveling by air. Before air travel was actually created, okay, so it was first conceptualized in imagination, right? See, even all of us are aware that there is a reference to Pushpaka Vimanam in Ramayana also. So thus this imagination answers the fundamental question that acts as bedrock for creation of reality. See, I have to travel for longer distances. How can I travel for longer distances? The best way is by traveling by air, because on air there is no traffic, there is very less friction, etc., etc. So thus actually that led to many people imagining travel by air, which later which inspired many people. Many people tried it, and finally it culminated in the creation of aeroplane by Wright brothers. So thus there is a problem, but how to solve this problem? There may be multiple ways. So it is only the imagination that gives us various solutions to that problem, and finally that imagination, somebody will pick one of those imaginary solutions to make actual solution. So then how to create? See, it does not end at what to create, friends. It also, imagination will also gives a path, roadmap for how to create also. See, that means imagination helps planning. See, one would be able to plan properly only when that person is able to imagine properly. Correct. So let us say, suppose I have to conduct a wedding. First I have to imagine how the wedding should be conducted. So once I imagine how the wedding should be conducted, accordingly I should select the wedding planner. Accordingly I should select caterer, food caterer, etc., etc. So basically it is the imagination that will help us in planning also. Without imagination, you can never create a proper reality. So you will, let us say you are conducting an event, you will imagine, so who will come, what should be the components of that event, etc., etc. So a lot of things go into it. I mean, I think I need not have to elaborate much on that. Hope I have made sense. So the third thing is, imagination actually cautions. What do you mean by cautions? See, imagination is a very strong tool that would help us to imagine, that would give us a foresight as to various consequences of a particular action. See, one particular action can lead to multiple consequences, right? So you do like this, what if analysis it is exactly. So if you do like this, what will happen? If you do like this, what will happen? What if this happens, what will I do? So thus actually it is actually a powerful aid, powerful tool of what if analysis. So that would that would help a person to anticipate the adverse consequences that may follow because of a particular course of action. So this foresight of anticipation would help a person to design techniques, design courses of action that would insulate a person from being adversely affected by a particular adverse consequences. So thus imagination helps in aiding reducing adverse consequences and promoting favorable consequences also. Then the last thing is motivation. See, basically power of imagination, okay, the power of imagination is immense. So it actually motivates a person to reality. See, a person, let us say there is a beggar really wants to become rich. Okay, so he would actually imagine first as to how can he live if he becomes rich. He thinks of a big bungalow, palatial bungalow. He thinks of a foreign car. He thinks of servants at home, etc., etc. So actually that life tantalizes him, attracts him, entices him so much that he is powered to work hard and finally earn wealth, secure wealth, mobilize money. Finally, that actually most of us that actually leads a person to work harder and so that he can become rich. See, even for most of us, most civil service aspirants for that matter, so what is something that keeps us going? We would imagine how would we be treated if we clear this exam and become civil servants. How would I be treated if I become an IAS officer? How would I be treated if I'm an IPS officer and goes to the field with neatly dressed uniform, etc. Correct. It is that power. Okay, if I become IAS officer, I'll be respected like this. If I become IPS officer, everybody salutes me. So those imaginations that crop your mind are something that keeps you moving, right? So thus imagination gives one essential component for anybody, that is motivation. That motivation gives that ability to relentlessly pursue something and get it done come what may. So thus imagination all helps in creating reality. Of course, friends, we have argued that imagination is extremely important for creating reality. But does that mean that imagination is unlimited? No, imagination also has its own limitations. Correct. So that also we need to discuss. See, the first thing is existing technology. What is this existing technology? See, friends, all of us have read Harry Potter, right? So most of us, at least, if not all. So most of us have read Harry Potter. While reading Harry Potter, we have imagined we have imagined the entire setup of Hogwarts, etc., etc. For at least most of us, after reading the book and you watch the movie, you feel that the director has not been able to translate the every imagination of yours into reality, let alone the imagination of the novelist. What I am trying to tell you is there are always limitations for creating imagination into reality in the form of existing technology. See, imagine, friends, there were very let us say this Harry Potter novel was written before the advanced development in VFX, visual effects, which we are seeing today, correct? Then we would not have been able to see even this much in Harry Potter movie, correct, actually. So thus whatever you think may happen, may not happen, this is mainly decided by the advance in technology, correct? At that point of time, whatever is available existing, you can use that to create reality. If that whatever is needed to create that reality is not at all available, then it becomes very difficult. So imagination is always many steps, many foot ahead of reality. So the second thing is social environment. See, what is this social environment? See, sometimes the social environment also acts as an obstacle in creating many progressive realities. For example, let us say same-sex marriage, correct? It's a concept, it's an imagination of two males or two females getting married to each other. But of course, nobody could think of all these things, say 100, 200 years ago, because the society was not yet progressive enough to understand the same and accept the same. At least if those people may not be accepted, but at least they should not be rescinded, right? They should not be punished, right? They should not be killed, right? Society was not that much tuned a few 100 years ago. But today, there is a voice in the form of LGBT community and they are actually fighting for it, correct? So what I am trying to tell you is societal setup is also important. You can think of something, you can imagine something, but if society doesn't accept it, you cannot create that reality. So same is the case with all social problems that we face today, sati, etc., etc. Though William Bentinck was able to bring a law to banning sati, did it get banned completely? No, right? Society was not ready to accept a progressive change. So this is how social environment can also act as a hindrance. Third one is political environment. See, some changes are not at all allowed and entertained by existing political setups. Even initially, the concept of freedom of speech, the concept of dissent was not accepted by political setup, and finally all the dissenting voices were being subdued, correct? But later, as time passed by, democratic setups started being being the norm, then the things started improving finally. So all these things are important. So the political environment also should be supportive. So another example that actually strikes my mind is Afghanistan. Actually, in Afghanistan, actually the government does not support your imagination of women choosing a partner of her own, correct? So perhaps many progressive thinkers in Afghanistan must be visualizing how women can choose their own life partners. But of course that political setup may not accept it at this point of time. So then that does not become reality easily. Then the last one is finance. Of course, friends, finance is important. Now the best example is exploring other planets, extraterrestrial life. Correct? Somebody really wants to go and have their home at home on moon or some other planet actually. But is it financially viable? No, right? Many scientific projects get shelved only because that is financially unviable. So these are some of the limitations that actually constrain imagination from turning into reality. So then, friends, once we have argued why imagination is important for reality, then we have discussed the limitations of imagination. Now it is important for us to introduce that element of analysis into essay by seeking answer to the question, is every reality an offshoot of imagination? Correct? See, we have hitherto argued that yes, it is imagination that leads to reality. But is it so for everyone? For every reality? The answer is not necessarily, friends. Of course, here I want to bring into light actually, so two different forms of realities. One is deliberate reality and another one is incidental reality. What is this deliberate reality? Deliberate reality is something which is deliberately created. Incidental reality is something which gets created on its own. Mostly deliberate realities happen because of imagination, but incidental realities happen on their own. They don't need imagination. Nobody wants to imagine anything. It happens on its own. While every scientific invention is an imagination, mostly it's an imagination because you conduct a scientific experiment and then to create something new. But incidental realities happen on their own. The best example is actually the discovery of penicillin. All of us are aware that actually Alexander Fleming did not actually intend to discover penicillin. Actually, he did not conduct any scientific experiment to discover penicillin. It was only that he had left some cultures in his lab, and after 2 weeks he suddenly accidentally found out that actually, so the growth of that culture was actually prevented by penicillin, something like that. And finally, so the penicillin was invented, and it was the first antibiotic, and it revolutionized entire pharmaceutical world actually. So what I'm trying to tell you is some realities happen on their own. So it is not always necessary that imagination should necessarily precede any reality. Of course, so the deliberate realities are preceded by imagination. Incidental realities are not preceded by imagination. Then there are routine realities also, right, which happen on their own. See, you go to school every day, you go to classes every day, you eat every day, etc., etc. They are also physical realities only. For that, you don't imagine, right, I should eat like this, I should eat like that, I should sleep like this, I should walk like this, etc., etc. They happen on their own. So thus what I am trying to tell you is deliberate realities are an offshoot of imagination, but not all realities are an offshoot of imagination. So now that we have at least having said that, also there is no doubt in our mind that imagination is extremely powerful. It can actually create. See, incidental realities happen on their own. So they may be desirable, they may be undesirable also. Sometimes undesirable realities also get created. What are these undesirable realities? If one conspiracy theory has to be believed, even this coronavirus was actually accidentally got escaped from the Wuhan lab and finally ravaged the entire world, right? So what I am trying to tell is, sometimes these realities, incidental realities, can be very undesirable, can be very dangerous also. However, deliberate realities are under our control. If we imagine right things, we can create right realities. If we imagine wrong things, we create wrong realities or dangerous realities, or whatever you may call it. So thus it is important for us to condition that imagination. If everyone's imagination is conditioned in a fruitful way, only benign realities get created. If that imagination is not conditioned properly or favorably, it may lead to harsh realities, unfavorable realities, undesirable realities. Okay, so thus this conditioning of imagination is not a one-time effort, it is a continuous process. So it has to be conditioned through proper education, proper morality, proper ethical upbringing, tough law enforcement, etc., etc. So having said that, friends, it is time to conclude. So we can very well conclude from the above discussion that imagination has immense power to motivate someone to create reality. Imagination also has immensely equally powerful to give a foresight as to what may or may not happen in future. So thus it is important to condition the imagination in such a way that only favorable, desirable realities get created. So and also undesirable realities are prevented. Okay, friends. So this is from my end. So thank you. So thanks for your patient listening. So we'll meet you next week with one more topic.